the key thing to but to point out is radical Islam's whole structure is is there to take away, is meant to make the person feel hopeless, and that they're the only solution. And when you feel hopeless, you then go to the most extreme options, and in that circle of hopelessness, the Jew is the reason for your hopelessness.
So it's sort of, cult-like is what you're saying.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a cult. Nothing more, nothing less. Probably something more.
But it's like, is all radical Islam that sort of cult with the Jew as the...
No, radical Islam is its focus. It's extreme, and it's always looking to push further extremes. And you can look at it through just modern human history. You had Hamas, who were extreme and radical. You had Al Qaeda, and then ISIS, who were even more radical. It's the way it is. So I had got to the point where I was like, okay, the only way forward now is violent jihad. I've done everything else. So I start making plans to go to a terrorist training camp, and in that time I come across The Case for Israel by Alan Dershowitz.
Okay, before we get there, sorry, I want to get there, but because again, this is just something I was always curious about. The impression I get is that the Muslims maybe, that's often they get more radicalized only by saying we have to be as literal as possible with the Quran.
Yes.
And and if Quran talks jihad, what are we doing in the West doing X, Y, and Z? That was always my impression. I wanted to know if that's
no, for sure. And there's a lot of schools of thought. I would probably say the majority who take the Quran literally, because there are certain statements from the Quran which says this is a book without any faults. Right. And where there are contradictions, you have abrogation to go, this is why. So it is that the more literal you get, the more scary and extreme it can get. Look, there are verses in the Quran which says, slay the unbelievers wherever you find them, chase them away, they chased you out, etc., etc. Now, if you view that in a historic lens, which some Muslims do, it's talking about one battle at one time. But if you go from the approach that the Quran is ever binding and always relevant, that is essentially a manifesto for a lifelong conflict with unbelievers.
Sure. Okay, so let's then you decided that you wanted to do your own debunking of the Zionist narrative.
Yeah, I was like, let me beat the Zionists at their own game. Yeah. So I started reading it, and it's the first time I've been exposed to anything like
this. This is The Case for Israel by Dershowitz.
I've never read anything which has even been. So everything that I've read, Israel has no right to exist. So for anything to make an alternative argument was absurd.
Right.
But he makes points which I'd never, the idea that there's never been a Palestinian state was completely alien to me. The idea that the Jews have been in the Holy Land for thousands of years before Islam was even on the world map is absurd to me. Dershowitz being a lawyer, he has multiple sources for every claim he makes. So I read this and go, this is rubbish. I completely reject this. So I go, I'm gonna disprove this. So I start reading, and the books I read, here's the thing, and I think this cuts to where we're at today. On the Israel side, there is this idea that here are the facts, we'll put them out there, people will realize that. The other side goes heavy on emotion, tugs at the heartstrings, and look, when you show people dead babies and people with limbs missing, nobody cares about your facts anymore.
But that's not only the radical Islamists, that's the whole left wing.
Yeah, that is something which is very common. So
it's one of the problems with Jews. We think that everything's logical, and we could win an argument, therefore you're going to believe us.
Yeah, so that is, and it is. It's so widespread now. Facts don't matter, unfortunately.
Really, yeah.
So after trying to do that and trying to find facts to counter facts, I came to a point where I was like, okay, this isn't adding up. And I went through a very strange 2-year period of researching, and I came to this.
How old are you at this time?
I would have been around, let's see, 27. I'm aging a lot. I would have been about 22, 23.
Okay.
So I get to this point where I'm like, okay, this is what I believe, and I can't accept that I'm wrong, but nothing is backing it up. The evidence is contrary. I went through to this strange period of depression where, it's difficult when you have your truth and your truth isn't the truth.
Right.
So I decided that I need to get closure on this, and the only way is to come to Israel.
Okay. 2007,
I go to Israel with the intention of seeing the evil firsthand, being detained at the airport, beaten up, deported, whatever.
Right.
So I turn up, I spend 8 hours in security, kind of my own fault. Not a bad experience, but it was, They asked what is the purpose of your visit, and I was honest and said, look, I'm anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, not so sure. So I can understand, but that's another story for another day. But eventually I go into Israel, and it was seeing Israel firsthand. Like, I'm still with this mindset that this place is evil, that there's apartheid, and look, you spend 5 minutes in Jerusalem, you know, it's absurd. You know, and what stood out to me, you know, aside from speaking to Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, people who are Druze, Jews from Ethiopia, Guatemala, like these places which are, you know, the narrative is, yeah, all the Jews are from Poland or whatever, you know. What stood out for me was that speaking to Israelis, I'd grown up with this idea that they hate me and Israel is anti-Islam, but people just want to be left alone, or they just want peace. It's like, look, we don't care, like, do your thing. And that was like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting. But essentially, it was being exposed to the reality. It was at the Kotel of all places where I had this kind of eureka moment that, okay, I've got this wrong. There's a real realization of the facts. And also, it's a moment of reflection when you realize what the heck has happened to you. You're at a point where you think it's okay to kill people. You're at a point where when buses were being blown up in the Second Intifada, you were okay with that. Like, that's no human should be at that point. Especially when you've grown up in the West with a fairly comfortable life by all, you know, by the standards of most people.
Did you visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque during this time?
Yeah, I had one of those prove you're Muslim moments, which is really annoying. But yeah, it's pretty. But yeah, that was really.
But was there any? Did you hear any lectures there? Were there any sermons?
No, when I went, it was fairly quiet. Well, as quiet as it was. So I didn't go at like a Friday prayer or anything.
Now, just wondering if you met relatively radical Muslims while you were in Israel as well.
I did. So I went to Ramallah because I met. It was interesting. Again, there was a mixture. There were those people who were like, look, we're just trying to get on with life, but there were those people who are happy to justify murder, and it was just so. I think here's the thing: if I'd done the trip in another order and gone to, I may have come out with a different perspective. But to speak to, you know, in Israel, people are like, look, we want peace, we just want to be left alone, and here you're like, look, what else can we do? We have to fight them. They shouldn't be there. It's like, okay, this is putting things into perspective. So when I went back to the UK, I had a decision. Look, you can either go, okay, I was wrong, I'm just going to leave it alone, or you go, look, this is what I saw, this is the truth. And I felt a responsibility. Look, you can't one, believe that, put that poison out there, and then walk away once you know the truth. And also, beyond that, I felt that this is a moral issue. This isn't just a Jewish issue. And ultimately, you know, Israel for me, and this is a realization I came to, beyond the politics, beyond the religion, beyond territory, it's about survival. It's about survival of the single greatest story in human history, the story of the Jewish people. Look, without the Jewish people, one, you know, there would be no Christianity in Islam. But even more so, look, you look at the values of the world before the Hebrew prophets. Look at Sparta, Rome, how people with physical disabilities were treated, mental disabilities, how the elderly were treated. It was the Hebrew prophets who went, look, no, war isn't the ideal, peace is the ideal. Care for your neighbor, care for the elderly. Education is a right of everyone, not just the wealthy. And those world-changing ideas are what the morality in our modern world is based on. And yet here you have the Jewish people back in their homeland, thriving, and it's become the single greatest target of BDS, political delegitimization, and terrorism. I couldn't just sit there and go, well, this isn't my problem.